cleanse our consciences from acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God. What did Jesus do after He died on the cross? After Jesus died on the cross, He went into heaven. He went into the Holy of Holies in heaven. He went to the mercy seat in heaven, and He sprinkled His own blood on the mercy seat, therefore making a way for us into the very presence of God for all of eternity. And because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, we can live in the New Jerusalem. Get this, church. Get this. We can live in the New Jerusalem, which is a perfect cube, just as the Holy of Holies is a perfect cube, in the very presence of God for all of eternity. The Holy of Holies is so amazing, so wonderful, almost unspeakably amazing, that it radiates the very presence of God, and it emanates it through the whole city itself. We will live with God forever in His presence because of the blood of Jesus Christ. The Holy of Holies is a cube, perfect cube. The New Jerusalem is a cube, a perfect cube, very similar to each other in that it bears the very presence of God. Incredible, amazing when you think about this, because of the blood of Jesus Christ. Verses 17 and 18 give us much more description than about the city. He says in verse 17 of our text, Revelation 21, He measured its wall, and it was 144 cubits thick, by man's measurement, which the angel was using. The wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, pure as glass. These walls don't necessarily keep people out. There's no evil to keep out. The walls define the city. And think about this. Even the walls are a multiple of 12. 12 times 12 is 144. What does he tell us? That the walls are 12, these cubits, right? Cubits are 18 inches or whatever it is. And the walls are literally 216 feet thick. The walls are 216 feet thick. Multiples of 12. And gold. The Bible tells us that the gold in New Jerusalem is so pure that it is transparent like glass. Transparent glass in John's day was a highly precious commodity. Glass making back then was pretty crude. They kind of knew how to do it, but they didn't really know how to do it well, and it was pretty rare and pretty expensive if you got glass to the point where it was transparent. And so if you had transparent glass, you had a commodity almost as priceless as gold. And transparent glass was only found in kings' palaces. And so what does John say? John says that the gold in New Jerusalem is so pure that it's transparent like glass. That even gold in New Jerusalem allows the glory of God to radiate through it. It is like transparent glass. Incredible. Verses 19 and 20, he goes on. John is stunned at this. He goes on. He goes in verse 19, the foundations of the city walls were decorated with every kind of precious stone. The city just radiates with color. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The city itself sparkles with the beauty of God. A jasper is a clear stone, almost like a diamond. A sapphire is a brilliant, deep blue. Emerald is that green, those shades of green. And green is like everlasting life. You think about the colors. A sardonyx is red and white stripes, like the stripes of Jesus Christ Himself in Isaiah 53. Carnelian is a deep, almost a blood red, like the blood of Jesus that cleanses us from all sin. A chrysolite is a gold with hues of yellow, royalty, the royalty of Christ. A beryl is green with blue hues. Beautiful. The city just stunningly sparkles. A topaz is yellow and green. A chrysoprase is green with hues of gold. A jacinth is violet and blue, like the royalty of Christ. And so is an amethyst, like a divine royal stone. He goes on in verse 21, and he describes some gates. These gates, by the way, are 460 miles apart. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. The great street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this, are you? I mean, the walls of the city are 216 feet thick. Can you imagine the size of the gate? Can you imagine the size of the oyster? Like the oyster is like the size of New Jersey. Here's this oyster. It's massive. I just having trouble getting my head around this. The gate is so massive, so incredible. And did you know that the pearl was the most valuable possession in John's day? That a pearl was actually more valuable than gold? Remember the parable of the pearl of great price? Why is that parable given? Because in John's day, in Jesus' day, the pearl is the most valuable commodity in the world. Pearls were harvested from the ocean floor. They were a mystery of the deep. You'd literally have to harvest hundreds, sometimes thousands of oysters to find a single pearl. They didn't know back then how a pearl was formed. They didn't know that you could irritate the oyster or wound the oyster and get a pearl to form. They didn't know that. So they would risk their lives, and pearl divers had one of the shortest life expectancies because you had to dive way down. Sometimes they wouldn't make it way up again. They would often die from the bends because they went so far down that the blood would, the bubbles would form in their blood. They would die. They didn't know why. So pearl divers were very well paid because they didn't live very long. They'd harvest vast quantities of pearls to get one oyster, and they were mysterious and amazing and wonderful. And if you had a pearl, if you had a really big pearl, if you had a really cool pearl, you had something that was more valuable in John's day than gold. So what does John say? John says that the gates of the city are literally a pearl. Each gate, huge gate, how does God do that? I don't know. Think, how does John describe all this stuff? John's probably just sitting there going, look at that thing. That's a pearl. How big was the oyster? I don't know. But can you imagine carving that thing? This gate is a pearl. Imagine how it glistens, but I want you to understand something far more amazing than that. Far more incredible than that. Is that the only way to create a pearl is to irritate or to wound an oyster. We know that now. We can understand that. So there's something that either penetrated or something that hurt the oyster, and then the oyster secretes a chemical to surround that, right?